Hi, everyone. I'm David Rose with USXP. Welcome to the Scaling Stateside podcast. Along with my co-host and co-founder, Matt Oxley, we are on a mission to help founders of scale-up companies from the UK and EU better understand the US expansion and US fundraising journeys. And as part of that mission, we are having conversations with founders who've already made that journey and successfully expanded to the US. And we're having that conversation today. So we have a special guest with us, Georgina. Welcome to the show. Please tell us, our audience, about your background just briefly, and we'll get rolling here.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. So, my background, I did psychology, where I became obsessed with measuring a consumer experience. And then I became a lawyer. I first off did a stint with Clifford Chance as a leverage finance lawyer, where I slept under my desk doing big deals and traveled the world and realized it wasn't quite for me. So I went to represent consumers at Which, the equivalent of Consumer Reports over in the US. And I worked all around big data and privacy. And it was during that time that I began to understand the incredible competitive edge which all the online giants had versus bricks and mortar, which is what my dad was in. And he lost 50% of his business to Amazon. And so that was where the seeds of TruRating, my business, were planted, and how to get better real-time consumer transaction data into the hands of retailers. So
great. Well, we're going to want to dig into that some more, because that is a super interesting path to entrepreneurship, which we always love to hear. But before we get started, we would like to take it all the way back to the beginning. Tell us about your very first paid job as a youngster.
It was, babysitting. I think probably the standard job for many 14-year-olds, the girls down my road. Pretty harrowing when I went to the bathroom and she'd tried to shave her legs at age 10 with her dad's razor, and I wasn't invited back after that.
Maybe not the career for you after all.
Love it. Love it. Well, if I may, can I just dig into your origin story? As David said, it's, we were talking about it before, and it's fascinating. Psychology to law, founding a tech company. What was the moment that you decided and got the entrepreneurial bug and decided to leave, some would say the safety of Which and build TruRating?
Yeah, interestingly, I'd had the idea while I was at Which, and then I was also working on another of my sort of entrepreneurial ideas there as well. And I put my heart and soul into this project. And then McKinsey came on, and they said, Which needs to focus on their core. And so my project was shelved, and I knew this other idea I had wouldn't have any chance of succeeding. And at the time, I'd just fallen pregnant. And I think it's interestingly when a lot of women decide to start their own paths, and it was just like, I'm not having anyone else really decide on the future success of what I put my blood, sweat, and tears into. I'm gonna own it, and I'm gonna own my time, and just not be beholden to anybody else. And so that was, I guess that was the deciding moment. And I bought TruRating.com a few hours after my cesarean with my daughter on my hospital bed. And so I was like,
dude, are you kidding me?
Going, yeah. So, and my waters actually broke interviewing a restaurant manager, because I was trying to understand whether restaurant managers, retail managers would use my product, and I was waddling around Covent Garden in London trying to interview people, and my waters broke, and the hospital are like, you need to get in here right now. And I'm like, I just need to finish this interview. It was the stars aligned.
All in from the start.
Yeah.
Have you always had that entrepreneurial spirit, or was it you needed to find the right idea?
Yeah, I think so. I guess, a load of us in the UK would do Duke of Edinburgh, and have, so I was hosting foam nightclub parties with my friends, while still at school, and flogging, I'd go to these warehouses and buy loads of off-the-cuff nail varnish and flog it to all the kids at school till the teachers stopped me. So yeah, it's definitely in there. But I guess I was also quite, yeah, I also wanted to have that security.
Yeah.
So I followed the traditional routes in careers until I realized that yeah, I had my calling.
And then talk us through kind of obviously the creation of TruRating. Can you talk us all the way up to actually thinking about new markets? Because you're obviously in the US, and we'll unpack that later. But all the way through from like creation to thinking about new markets, what was that journey like? Just unpack it for everyone.
Yeah, I guess it probably comes with a lawyer's and data sort of mentality, in the sense that I knew what we would began doing in the UK was unique, and I knew that it was the start of something really big, and I knew that the UK wasn't the world, and so it was really, I need to lock down. So it was, from a legal perspective, it was, getting my trademarks, getting my patents really quickly, starting companies in the US, and then also Australia as well. And Australia sort of served as a really good Petri dish, I guess. It's where they were much quicker sales cycles, obviously much smaller market, but where we could quickly get new innovation and new products out. And then US was obviously the big daddy of it all, with the scale and scope. So
And did you raise capital in the UK? What was how did you kind of fund it to start with?
yeah, the initial team sort of all, we all worked for sweat equity at the beginning, and then it was just very much sort of angel rounds, which just grew, and it was always through networks. So it was one angel would then open us up to a private family office, which they'd used, etc., etc. So
Mm.
we never actually had the traditional Series A, Series B, VC route. We just raised gradually, but we've raised in like 40 million now across, since the beginning, but it's always been quite an iterative process.
And you're kind of the quote I love about you, and I'm sorry I did some sleuthing, was you throw her out the door and she climbs in through the window.
Oh no, is that out? How is that out there?
Um,
Yeah.
and that to me is, and I'm making a real huge segue and jump here, just says a huge amount about your tenacity, your kind of grit, your drive. And one of the things that I'm really interested in, again, sleuthing on you, is you've talked about the neurochemistry of entrepreneurs. And this is something that I'm really fascinated in, because I'm an entrepreneur in residence at VC in London. And one of the things that I've been working on recently is a founder index. And what it actually does is it has the traits that we look for in people versus in businesses. Because I think at the moment, there's too much sway into understanding the business and the metrics rather than the people. And that's kind of what I picked up from some of your kind of work and thoughts. So I wonder if you could just unpack how you think about that. And again, I realize we're making a massive segue here, but I think it's a really important kind of thing to unpack.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess it was when I read about ants and how you have all these ants have these different roles within a colony.
Yeah.
And you'll always have these ants which almost sort of, sacrifice themselves, going out to find new areas and new land ahead of the pack.
Mm.
Really, really high risk strategy. And I remember reading about this, and they were saying that the brains of these ants were different from a neurochemical perspective to the rest in the ant hill or whatever. And I thought, oh my God, that's me. I'm like, and that's other entrepreneurs, where when you look at the facts of what you continually risk and what you put ahead of yourself all the time, it doesn't really make sense. This continual belief and drive years after year, and in the, God, my board, one of my board members called me delusionally optimistic. And my chairman said, well, of course she is. If she wasn't, we wouldn't be here. And I think
I'm laughing because I'm called that. That was what I was called 2 board meetings ago. Matt, you're continually like you're the optimist of optimists. It's like, but we believe in you because of that. You know,
Yeah,
it's kind of, yeah, it's this aura that I think entrepreneurs actually have to have, which is like I believe in myself, believe in the idea,
yeah,
and optimism.
yeah. Like, it's a form of manifestation, I guess, that that belief is unshakable. I think another one
Yeah.
of my investors called me the English bulldog, and I was like, oh, I don't know how to take that. But it is that again, just that, yeah, that tenacity
Yeah.
and that belief. And so, yeah, I'm pretty sure in years to come they'll find out that my serotonin and dopamine is all messed up. Probably Matt, due to our heritage and on some Leeds dance floors, which we were talking about before.
Yeah, I think the polybot's got a lot to do with that.
But
But
yeah,
I'm just fascinated by it. I think just through the work that I've certainly been doing, you get into the core traits, and I do think founders are wired ultimately differently, and it's putting those people first and understanding who they are, how you support them, and because to me, it's about you want to back the people that can pivot. You want to back the people that can run through walls. You want to back the people that have that optimism when no one else has it, have the belief, get up in the morning, they're solving the problems. That's all they're thinking about. And that to me is more important than the idea because they will get to the idea if you back the
yeah,
right people. That's kind of my thesis. And that's why it's so just fascinating understanding the psychology of it. Now that I'm kind of like through multiple businesses, it's like, is there something wrong with me? You know, but now you go back to it's like, there's probably a lot of people where they've got things wrong with them as well. So yeah, it's fascinating. But just to kind of get back onto I think the state side side of this because I've been through this myself. I moved like I said, my girlfriend at the time in 2013. We sold everything we had, put it in 2 suitcases, moved to Portland, Oregon. And my pitch to her was, hey, we're only going for a year or so. Like, hey, let's see what happens. 10 years later, 2 kids, a dog, and then 2 shipping containers came back. So I'd love to just hear kind of your experience in embarking on the US. You know, what drew you there? What was the moment? What was the data set? What was that conversation that really, you know, made you decide, right, that's where I need to be?
I knew that it was. I've always thought really big, and my whole belief is that we should, eventually go throughout the world. And so it was always a path. I knew I wanted to get on quickly. I think, meeting an American who really understood, and I met him on British soil at an event, who really understood that's the space, talked the language, had the network, was really key for me because, that's who I picked to go and build the US team. But then, that the culture was so important to me, what we're growing in the UK and how to mirror that. And I knew the competitive advantage of being, Americans are very sympathetic to the entrepreneur, I think.
Mm.
They have in their sort of, I guess, their national memory, like my forefathers came off the ship, they put a flag in the ground,
Mm.
and they built my family, and it's that like
Yeah.
that entrepreneurial spirit in the US where people they want to believe in your journey, they admire you going out there. And I knew that our story and my story, if I could get in front of people, would really resonate in the US. And so we made that decision really quickly to at first it was, every 2 weeks I'd be crossing the pond. And then we moved in 2017 over. So at the beginning, we just all sort of decamped into our president of North America. We persuaded him to get a bigger flat and all moved in with him. And then when we put a unicorn bike seat on his bike for my daughter, he came and gave us the lecture that we needed to find our own place.
He's like, I got you some keys. Get out of here.
How you
Yeah.
landed in Atlanta. I was curious about that because a lot of companies coming from the UK, go to New York because they've been there before, or go to Silicon Valley because they think they have to use their tech. How did you land in Atlanta? Is it because you had the US president there?
No, he was in Raleigh actually, so he moved. He moved to Atlanta uh, during the week. I guess we work with payments companies, and Atlanta is the epicenter of payments.
For
So
sure.
70% of credit cards get processed there, and so it was a certain type of skill set we needed, the partnerships, etc. But also, Atlanta is really good value for for a business. Like it's far cheaper than Manhattan or the Valley, and you've also
Mm,
got it's a arguably a less competitive employee set in terms of there's amazing colleges there, Georgia Tech, etc. And so um, yeah, it made sense from a business perspective as well. And 270 days of sunshine a year don't go
mm,
amiss. So yeah, we really loved our time there. It's a city which is really winning the big tech companies as well.
mm,
So it definitely felt that we were on that rise with it. And it's whether people talk about the Southern hospitality, but it's definitely a business community where people all the time want you to succeed, want to
mm.
help you, are reaching out to make connections and everything. So it was a great place for us to start and grow.
Which city, London or Atlanta, has better food?
Oh, yeah, London. Like the best thing about London is you go to any neighborhood and it's like you've gone on holiday. You're having the best
Mm.
Ethiopian, and I've never found a good as chicken tikka masala, or actually paneer now since I turned vegetarian. Than you do in. That's what I really miss, the London curries. So
One of the things that I speak about openly whenever I'm doing panels or talks is the personal journey that I had to go on in America, because I think there's kind of a couple of camps that people fall into. I think some people underestimate going to America, and I think some people kind of are very scared of it. I went over there, and I felt I've always been more American than I have English. Just the optimism and, like you say, hey, can do attitude, and I'm putting myself in the ring, and all of those kind of great metaphors. But the one thing that I did overlook was I experienced a degree of like loneliness when I was over there. It took me probably 9 months to be comfortable in a sales setting, quite honestly, because I couldn't talk about the weather and I couldn't talk about Man United. So I didn't really have a lot to kind of like pull on. So, to your point, I had to learn about like NCAA basketball and, how the kind of, Knicks were doing. Hey, it's game five, So I had to really kind of indoctrinate myself and I think respect the American culture by immersing myself in it. Did you find the same, or did you kind of slip in quite easy?
mm, I guess I probably haven't tried to slip him. Like
Mm,
probably small chat is based on my accent, and just and wanting to talk about my time in America or something. So I've
mm,
never and to be honest, and I don't know how similar this is for so many entrepreneurs, I can just about manage looking after a family and being a mom and rescuing dogs and my business, and that's me full. And so
right.
when like I haven't built an incredible social
Mm.
network out here, and that's okay because these are that's my focus at the moment. So
Yeah, that is your network, right?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, because I think some people are daunted by it. They look at it and go, "Oh, what do I do?" And my answer to that is get on a plane and figure it out. It doesn't have to be forever, but just go for 3 weeks, meet customers, meet prospects, meet VCs, like find out if it is for you. So I think that any words of advice for people that kind of are on that side of the fence where they're thinking about it, they're daunted by that kind of making that step. Any kind of words of wisdom for them?
I haven't met anyone who's ever regretted it. Everyone I've met who's made the leap has been incredibly overwhelmed with how like open and warm and hospitable Americans are. Probably don't get into politics, I'd say, is probably the good rule of thumb. But but and I guess I when I talk about my life just being, the business and a mum, it still just feels like 10 years on that I'm on holiday. You go out and like even just what an American would see as a really grim strip mall still feels like all the movies I saw on
Yeah,
American culture growing up as a kid. And it's still that element of, excitement and just the ability like to get out into big skies, big nature, and you can just get in your car and drive. And it's such, the exploring America is just amazing. You never get bored. And like each state is also like a different country. And I think that's, what you really need to recognize. Like the sort of business culture in the Midwest is completely different to what it is in New York, different to what it is in Florida. And so there's always something to learn. There's always new experiences. And so if you're that kind of person, like I guess like I naturally am, who's all, just take all of that opportunity and have an amazing adventure and you'll never regret it.
no, I love it. Those are amazing words. Because I agree with everything. It's I always describe it as a land of opportunity,
Yeah.
and I think just don't worry about the barriers. Get out there, go and meet people. People want to help you. There is an insane, I think, difference, and I'd love your perspective on this. Difference between I think hustle in Europe and hustle in America, and I think that's something that I think takes people a little bit by surprise. And I use the example of I had two kids that grew up in America, and at the age of 5 years old, they are in class in kindergarten doing show and tell about why my pencil is better than your pencil. So at 5, they're literally pitching against 20 other kids in their class. So
Mhm.
that is indoctrinated in them very early, as is I can be anything. I can be, whatever I choose, I can be. And I don't know if that is the same in the UK schooling and kind of ecosystem, but it's contagious. It's contagious once you're in it. And I think that is, that's certainly what kind of grabbed me.
Yeah, I think while you were talking, I was thinking my daughter got into softball and I'd go to watch her games. And this is, when she was like 9 or something.
Mm.
And the encouragement of all the songs, all the parents, what they'd sing and shout to the kids. And it's all like, you got this, Aniela. You're gonna go, girl. And I'm so bad at accents, but it's like it is this kind of confidence for these kids that like
Yeah,
you're amazing. Whereas like
yeah.
I think of me watching my dad watching my brothers play, where he's like, "Watch the bloody ball, Toby. Watch the bloody ball," and it's just like and I just do think it's this. Yeah, you're so right. It's how the kids are brought up here, and I also think it's interesting in the school systems every year you move. My daughter has a whole new group of people in her class in her
Mm.
year, 900 kids in her year. I was with the same girls in my class from age 13 to 18.
So, yeah.
And I think again it's that continual ease of Americans to be in any, so well, obviously it's a bell curve. I'm not making broad
Mm.
sweeping generalizations, but I do think it's that amazing advantage which Americans have of being at ease in new situations, that
Yeah.
innate confidence and belief, which maybe I think us in the UK could learn a bit of.
Yeah, we're still a bit like, oh, I'm so sorry. Like, I
Yeah,
describe it as like, we're a bit like Harry Potter. Like, oh, do you mind if I, we're very like still reserved.
I
And I
think.
think, I describe it as you have to find your American character when you're in America. How do you play that game? How does Matt from London become Matt from America. Like that took me a while to figure out. And it's lovely because you go on this curve and it's like, oh, I am being, the real version of me. I'm more American than I am English. And it's just the confidence. You can go in there and it's like, yeah, a bit of swagger. And I think I had to unlearn a little bit of my Britishness, quite honestly.
I think that, when you're from the world of VCs, but when you're a British, like, female in America, and, our off the cuff immediate response is to apologize and to always explain why things might not be as good as they could be, and to immediately, like, throw up all the flaws on the table,
Yeah.
rather than, like, whereas one of my board told me, Georgina, you've got to be an American male, channel your inner American male. You're being
Like,
far too female and British. And and then you look at the results of how many dollars follow the American male, and they're definitely that confidence follow. Yeah, money
yeah.
follows. So it's definitely something which I'm not sure. I think I'm still pretty female and British, but it's definitely something to be aware of what you're competing with.
Yeah.
And as you said, like, try and recognize those gaps and get more comfortable being a bit more out there, I think.
Georgina, you've raised $40 million, but it sounds like you've taken, much like a lot of things in your life, an unusual or untraditional path to that. So it's not the raise pre-seed seed in the UK, raise A round in Silicon Valley, and on goes. Walk us through, was that planned? Was that happenstance? How did all that unfold from a fundraising perspective?
Yeah, and interestingly, I'd say the majority of our funds raised have been connected through the UK. So yeah, it was just the way our business works is we have to build all the integrations with all the payment partners before we can get a dollar of revenue in, because they have to make our technology accessible to the retailers, which is who we sell our ultimate end product to. So we had large capital requirements early on. And so the bulk of our funding came in those early years. And we just raised through angels and networks, who then opened themselves up to further angels, private family offices, multiple family offices. And so we were always, if there's anyone else who you think might be interested in us or has experience in this space. So yeah, that was how we grew. And it was always very much sort of serendipitous, really, based on conversations at that time.
But there was no formal plan, like, we're going to go to the US and raise a big round. That was never part of the plan for TruRatings.
Yeah, getting a big VC who obviously comes with a huge black book of connections. It is quite the way business works in the US, when so much still is decided on a golf course through networks. I'm sure maybe our path might have been easier here. I don't know, but each comes with their own benefits and their own pitfalls. So, not having an aggressive VC on our back on sales figures and stuff has probably helped us through some times as well. So
yeah, it's great. Whatever works, right? You've obviously figured it out. Whatever works. Can you talk us through go to market a little bit and how that was different in the US market? So you obviously had traction in the UK first, but you come to break into the US. How do you think about product market fit and go to market motions and demand gen? Is it materially different? Is it similar? To help us understand the differences.
Yeah, I'd say you probably go through this cycle when you first launch in the US, of this just incredible euphoria, because every business meeting you have, everyone's like, wow, this is incredible, let's move forward. And then they ghost you for a few months and you're just like, I don't understand. And so whereas in the UK, on the flip side, they're like, that first meeting is them like, let me try and shoot this idea down as quickly as I can and find all the holes in it. And then, both of them probably end up at the same period in the same amount of time coming back to you and moving down the path. But I'd say definitely being aware of that optimism bias in the US that that can sometimes take some time to get moving. I guess it's just being built for scale. Like the retailers which we work with, yeah, they have 7,000 outlets. Like the volume, especially if you're a technology and data business, you need to be from the outset. You need to have that architecture and vision in mind. Yeah, being prepared to hop on a lot of planes and travel,
Mm.
FaceTime, build relationships. I'd say, the US is more expensive, well, at least in our experience, for hiring as well. People command, I'd say, but I don't know, was it like a third more on average, probably looking at across our different markets. And we also just wanted to be fair in like what I consider as good practice in terms of maternity, paternity, notice periods, etc. So I wanted to offer that across our markets, irrespective of what the employment law was. But yeah, I would say hiring in the US, and like would always be like, we'll pay a month's notice, either side. No US person is ever going to work for you for a month. They're just like, I'm out. Yeah, you've got me 2 weeks max. So it's a very different sort of mindset in terms of hiring and firing and the pace. And so, in the UK, it's like some of our team are on 3 months notice periods, and you have that time, then someone hands in their notice for a really considered and thoughtful handover. You need to be prepared in the US that you might just suddenly have your rug pulled from under you, and then you're
It,
scrambling.
it took me like the whole at will philosophy in the US is something that took me by absolute surprise, but also every founder that we speak to about moving to the US. You try and explain that, like, people can just quit and you can just fire people. They're like, blows their mind. It's like, yeah, this is kind of like shit you need to know.
Yeah.
How do you from a CEO perspective, from a cultural perspective, if you're trying to keep, if you have operations in multiple continents, how do you kind of keep a common culture? I know you're trying to talk about similar benefits and processes, but they're fundamentally different. How do you kind of keep a common company culture across all the locations?
Yeah, we had this. I remember going to a conference in Silicon Valley once, and saying that you had to have a mantra written on a wall. You couldn't call yourself a CEO if you didn't have a mantra written on a wall. It's just like, what? Anyway, so like on the plane home, I thought I better write a mantra, and I just thought this shouldn't have to be spelled out. It should be innate in all of us. But we did it, and I really actually recognize the importance of trying to distill what your culture is in words, because once you get that, then so much of that, what you build on top of that, whether it's like questions which you ask any new starter, in an interview process, really digging into, exactly what is their grit, what is their bounce back ability, what is their optimism, and then just that, after you've got that foundation, thinking of all the sort of cadences, the pattern of your business. So we have things like every Friday across all of our markets, we'll have true appreciation, true achievements, like TruRating. So we have to, but and so I think it's just getting that rhythm of your business and your culture and keeping that consistent. And just like, continual reminders to people. I'm not saying we've nailed it. I think it's always a work in progress. But I do think we've got a lot better at hiring people who exhibit those kinds of behaviors across our markets, which is important. And we've made, I think everyone talks about how important a diverse team is. God, I couldn't agree more at one level of a diversity. I remember interpreting that I needed people who were really diverse from me in terms of how they looked at the world. I think ensuring that you build a team of people who have your core values and attributes, I think, is important, especially when you're probably when you're small and in growth mode.
And then, you've obviously got a lot of traction. So we've talked a lot about the start. So let's kind of talk about the scale at this point. So you have over 1 billion verified ratings at this point. Yeah, that's pretty massive. Yeah. Was there any, as you were scaling and growing, was there any specific unlock that unleashed this? Like, was there a product change or a partnership or anything, or is it all just like cumulative progress and inertia from all the hard work early on?
Well, I think it's probably building that platform with our payment providers, and getting our tech into their systems, so then they can provide it to the retailers. But I think it's interesting talking about the difference in the UK and the US. The UK, I always think, is very much a followers market, and so the UK will often say, they'll be focused on which other retailers do you work with in our vertical, because they'll want the confidence of the examples to follow. And so I think that's been quite key.
One of the things that I do want to kind of just extract finally is just some words of wisdom for people going over there. And I think there's a perception that founders need to be in the US to break the US. Do you agree with that, or do you believe it to be a myth?
I know founders who are breaking the US, who are based in the UK and doing an amazing job. They just spend a lot of time on a plane. So I think FaceTime and building relationships is important. You've got to be prepared to do that for big contracts. When people are spending big money, they're buying from people. People buy from people, and so I'd say it is possible. But you just got to invest in travel.
And then just the final one: what's the hardest lesson you've learned going from the UK to the US that you couldn't have learned from a playbook or an advisor?
I think it goes back to that, whether it's from the US, but just, you've just got to be tenacious constantly. And, I know everyone
Find a window.
Yeah, everyone disses that, like, oh no, not more hustle porn. It's a huge market, and you've got a finite window of time, I always say, to run at it and make it. And so, have that fire burning and have that energy and go and hit it hard.
I love that. And I just want to say, look, thank you so much. This has been inspiring, and I'm sure it's going to be inspiring for so many people. Your journey, how you talk about it, the values you've obviously kind of been really considered that you've carried through. I just want to say thank you so much for your time. It's been unbelievable conversation.
Yeah, Georgina, thank you so much for making time to speak with us, and appreciate you sharing your journey, and hopes it helps other founders find their way into the US as well.
Thank you so much.
Right. See you next time. Bye.
Cheers. Bye-bye.